Juan Andres, can you hear? Harpy, can you tell us about Tepoztlan and what you found exciting there?
I remember very briefly about it. I remember the trip to Teotihuacan. How do you pronounce it? Teotihuacan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the right pronunciation? Yeah, I remember going there in a local bus, which was kind of a really interesting experience, frankly.
I remember. Well, okay. This is the fourth installment of Entrepreneurial Mindset Thursdays. This is a weekly conversation we have with entrepreneurs on a series of topics. We consider it, we like to think of it as like a tasting menu on the entrepreneurial journey for freshman students. The topics that are usually seen in the preparation session for this are very similar to what we saw in the MBA. But considering that our audience is younger and of a new generation where they're actually a lot more attractive than we ever were, and faster thinking and so forth, we have to adjust for that. But there's also a very big mindset gap between Silicon Valley, which is a very special place, and Mexico, which is a country that is developing in many respects very fast, and in other respects we're moving backward. But anyway, so Harpy, I'm not going to introduce you very in detail. Students have seen your online profile. And there will be room for you to talk about your passions and your journey, which I think is going to be much richer than any introduction that I could ever give. But anyway, so for you students, Harpinder Mahdan or Harpinder Singh is a close friend, somebody that I'm very fond of, somebody I'd like to drink micheladas with. And apart from that, he is an incredibly insightful entrepreneur and now venture capitalist. I appreciate him more as an entrepreneur than a venture capitalist, to be honest. But he's working on some very exciting stuff that I think, so Harpy, I'm going to stop speaking, turn it over to you. The format, like I mentioned in prep, is about 15 to 30 minutes that you can speak about about your journey and what you consider important in that journey, the insights you have. The topic for today is analysis of opportunities, and in particular, risk and return, and how you assess that as an entrepreneur more than as a VC. And we have some drilling going on here.
Cool. Do you want me to pick it up?
No. Let me see if there's a way that we can stop the drilling here.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start. Thank you so much, Harpy, for your time, because we know that is very scarce.
No, great to do this with you, Rahul. And good to meet everybody. I can't see anybody in the auditorium there, so I apologize for that, but I'm happy to make this very interactive and take any questions as they come along. So why don't I do this? I'll start with a quick background on my own journey, and then I'll maybe spend some time on how I became an entrepreneur and my entrepreneurial journey, how I evaluated opportunities, and then maybe I'll close out with some of my lessons learned in that process, and then we can open up to Q&A.
Thank you. That sounds excellent.
Yeah, Rahul, please feel free to guide the discussion. This doesn't have to be a monologue by me for whatever, 20, 30 minutes. So just very quickly, I grew up in India and did my bachelor's in CS there. I grew up in a town called Chandigarh, which is one of the most planned cities in India. So it was, and I spent a lot of my time in this very planned city, but I also really enjoyed hanging out in my village with my grandparents who were farmers. So I really enjoyed sort of being able to go visit them, hang around in fields and so on. So after that, I ended up in one of the IITs, which is Indian Institutes of Technology. These are, um, the premier engineering schools in India. You take this very, very sort of difficult exam, and I was lucky enough to get in. So I did my computer science there, and I was super keen on computer science, loved it. So I actually applied for a PhD program to US. And I came here for a PhD in high performance computing. So, um, I mean, fun fact is that was the first flight I ever took in my life to come to the US. I had never been on a plane before. Um, and when I showed up here, it was full of all kinds of like new things and cultural surprises, like, 18 different types of breads and, six different type of cheeses and three or four colored different capsicums and so on. So many, many new things. So it took me a while to kind of acclimatize to the life here. Um, and I really enjoyed the grad program. But after 2 years, I decided that I didn't want to be an academic. So I decided to drop out of my PhD program. I finished my master's, and then I was a software engineer for 4 years and really loved what I did. I was mostly a backend software engineer. So I was working on transaction processing. I worked on internet infrastructure. I was at Oracle here in Silicon Valley.
Was that where you
And
met your wife?
that's where I met my wife, as Rahul knows. Yes, she was at Oracle as well. Um, and after about 4 years of being a software engineer, and frankly, um, this will connect to my entrepreneurial journey, I had joined Oracle because I was keen on being an entrepreneur. And I figured that I should go work at a large, successful software company and see how they build software. So that's what took me to Oracle. And after about 2 to 2.5 years, I felt like I had learned enough. And frankly, I know you guys are all freshmen, but in a software world, product managers actually come to engineers and say, hey, can you build this for me? So there's product management, and then there's engineering. So I was feeling like, hey, these product guys are telling me what to do all day. And I don't want to be like, have anybody be bossing me around. So I want to I want to be the guy who wants to tell people what to build, not be sort of sitting in a cube on my keyboard and coding stuff. So that led me to, hey, I want to start my own company, and I need to, expand beyond being a software engineer. So I was lucky to go to Stanford Business School with Rahul. Um, and I got exposed to many, many amazing people. And when I was there, again, I was working on different business ideas. I was working on different business plans. And I ended up doing my summer internship at a VC firm, so a venture capital firm, people who invested in early technology companies. Um, and in my second year, um, I was pitching some of the ideas that I was coming up with to my classmates. So some of the people who had already started companies or people who were technical, I was pitching them ideas for validation and for feedback. And through that process, um, I was taking this class taught by, Chuck Holloway, who was a very famous entrepreneurship professor, and John Morgridge, who was the Cisco CEO and chairman. And in that class, I met my co-founders. And we worked on a number of ideas together. This is when we were still students. And I remember 3 weeks before we graduated, we felt that the idea we were working on had more competition than we thought. There was another company that was, we felt, farther ahead or way ahead of us. So we decided that we are not going to pursue that idea. So we killed the idea, but this was 3 weeks before graduation. So none of us had applied for any jobs. None of us had any jobs. So we're like, okay, now what do we do? We felt that so there was a team of 4 of us. We felt that we had worked very well together through this incubation process, through this process of working with each other, we felt that we had a good team, shared values. There was alignment in the type of company we wanted to create together. So we said, okay, not a problem that we don't have an idea. How about we spend 6 months together after graduation and we won't take jobs? So that was our handshake agreement. And we decided that we will spend that time diving into multiple different spaces and seeing if we can become experts ourselves or if we can talk to experts and understand what are the big emerging problems in these spaces. So we looked at that time problems like wireless rollout. Wireless was just being rolled out. Wireless data was just being rolled out. We looked at fiber optics. We looked at storage. There was just lots and lots of um, new storage that was coming online. So we looked at 4 different areas through a 6-month process, and I'm happy to go through how we organized our journey in Q&A if that's of interest to people. But we essentially were a team before an idea, so we had to come up with a way to go and find ideas, to become experts, to talk to people who knew more about these spaces than we did. And through that process, actually, we came up with not one, but we came up with multiple different ideas. Some were good, some were terrible. And we had to figure out, okay, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to start a company and don't have an idea, how do you use your time well? And how do you figure out a problem that people are going to pay for? So through that process, we came up with this idea in wireless infrastructure.
Harpy,
And
sorry.
one of the things we had done, maybe.
Sorry to interrupt. Before you dive into that, you mentioned right now that you felt comfortable, you felt that you shared values. And personal purpose and organizational purpose is something that we have discussed in different courses here. So that, and there's a lot of questions that students submitted
Yes.
on that topic. So perhaps we can anticipate those. How can you? I mean, it was. It reminded me. It was Dave, Scott, you. I'm missing someone.
And Eric.
Eric, of course. Yeah. Can you talk us through how that happened? How you developed that sense of being a team?
Yeah. So we were called Project Shed. That was our code name when we were going through this search process. So Shed stood for Scott, Harpy, Eric, David. There were 4 of us. And there were 2 parts to this alignment that Rahul is referring to. One is what we wanted to create. And second was how did we want to create it? So we spent a lot of time on, is there alignment on what would that company look like? And what would that opportunity look like that we're going to say yes to? So I'm happy to point Rahul to this case called Project Shed. So Stanford actually teaches a case called Project Shed, which is about our incubation journey. So that goes into a lot of detail about how did we get this alignment. And what we did was we actually came up with, on what we wanted to create, we came up with what we call sort of an attributes list or attributes matrix. So we very carefully spelled out. And Rahul, can I project here? Can people
I think
see
you
it
should
if
be able
I,
to. Yes, I think you should
if I
be
share
able
my
to.
screen?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, give me a second then. I'm going to project a couple of things.
I'm going to ask the students at the back to come down, please, so that you can see the screen. Jessica, Yo, can you please come down to fill the lower seats?
Now, give me a second. I'm just pulling this a couple of things up here.
How do you say? As we're waiting, I'll just elaborate on the trip to Tepoztlán that we had. So Harpy and his wife Sono came to visit us here in Mexico City, and we did a few road trips. We went to Tepoztlán with them, and it was interesting because Indian culture in many respects is very similar to Mexican culture. But Tepoztlán is a place where the old Mexico and the new Mexico sometimes collide and sometimes meet. But anyway, great. We can see your screen now. I think if you can zoom in, that would be amazing.
Sure. So
there you go.
So this is the what of what we wanted to create. So to Raul's question around how did you get alignment? So we actually wrote down what would that business look like. So as you can see here, we had things like, hey, we want to create a business that can hit $50 million in revenue in 5 years. We want it to be defensible. We want to have real barriers to entry. We want it to be in a high growth market. We want to solve a problem that is 2 years out. So 24 months out, we didn't want to be solving today's problem. We wanted to be solving a problem that was in the future, so that when we were ready, we would think that the market would be ready to. If we were trying to solve a problem today, then we would be too late to the market. Somebody would have addressed it by the time we build our product, and so on. So you can see, and then there were some team attributes around. We wanted one of us four to be the CEO. We had ideas around how we would fund the business. We wanted to build this business out of West Coast. And finally, we wanted to do something that we were actually proud of. We didn't want to start a business. There's many different ways to be successful. We wanted to do something that we were proud of. We didn't want to do shady stuff, and we wanted to not be too dependent on other people to become successful. So we didn't want, for example, to rely on a big company or big technology provider. We didn't want to be beholden to anybody. So, and finally, it was around, is this fun, fundable, and on the right trajectory? So this was a good way for us to get alignment on the what. What would that business look like? So we wanted to make sure that they weren't, between the four of us, there wasn't like, hey, one person wants to create a lifestyle business and, he wants to work 9 to 5, and the other person wants to create this, mega large company. Or we didn't want disputes around, hey, is it a marketplace? Is it a B2C business, a consumer business, or a B2B business? So this helped us get alignment around what type of business we would create. And then I think, let me project a different slide or different screen here.
This is pretty amazing. It's extremely rare to see behind the scenes what you're showing us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to show you something that we actually came up with after we came up with the idea of fiber towers. So here. So this is out of that project shed case. So one of the things we did when we wanted to work together, we had this discussion around, okay, how are we going to conduct ourselves? We actually wrote, sorry, let me switch here. Yeah, we wrote down things like, our hours of work. We're not going to have cell phone calls during meetings. We're not going to have open laptops. We're not going to be looking at our phones. We're going to really scrutinize how we work together. So if I could maybe project, go back, Raul, to that previous document. I think this will be useful to look at together. So this was the timeline that we gave ourselves. We said, we graduated in June, I think. And then we said we will start I think we started in July, and let's see here. Yeah, we started in July, and then we said we will give ourselves 6 months. We will spend 4 months coming up with top 2 ideas, and then 1 idea, and then by the end of 6 months, we will do what we call a go or a go home. So that was our timeline. And this is what I was talking about. We were very intentional about how we would conduct ourselves, because look, this is like 4 guys looking for an idea. We wanted to make sure that there was full commitment. We treated this like a day job, and this wasn't like, somebody is coming in for 2 hours and then he's got to go and have tea with his wife or whatever. We're like, okay, you're here, this is a full-time job, we are working together 5 to 6 days a week. And then we talked about, we had a weekly partners meeting. We talked about how we would spend that time. We talked about how we would do our search, and this is probably getting into more detail than we need to do here, but here we talked about things like, we are going to focus on few industries. We're going to look for specific industrial changes. We're going to look at a problem that is 2 to 3 years out, as I said. We wanted to be narrow, laser beam, not a flashlight. So we didn't want to be everything to everybody. And we wanted to measure our progress. And one of the things that we did, and Rahul is very familiar with this, we all learned this thing called feedback at Stanford. So we implemented that where we could be very open with each other about how we are doing and what's making us effective, what is not making us effective. So Rahul, this is a little bit about what we wanted to create and how we went about it.
Wow, that seriously, I don't know. I think there will be more questions in the Q&A about this.
Sure.
But I mean, for me, this is this is pure gold, man. Thank you so much for this. Okay,
yeah, no, absolutely.
Let's go back to the fiber tower story now. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, so we spent 6 months doing this, guys, and then we ended up starting a company called Fiber Tower. This is when 3G data was just being rolled out, and what we realized was that people are going to be using their cell phones, and that time there weren't iPads and so on. But we were like, okay, the demand for data in wireless is just going to explode, and there is a bottleneck. And that was, how do you take all the traffic from the cell sites to the switches, which is sort of the brains of a wireless network. And that piece of the network was served by, I think, to put it in today's terms, they were served by pipes that were about 1.5 megabits per second, which is tiny, right? I mean, you probably have home internet that is, I don't know, maybe 10 megabits or maybe 50 or 100 megabits per second. At that time, the cell sites used to have anywhere from like 1.5 to maybe 4 to 5 megabits per second. And this is not just one carrier. This is like, there may be like 3 or 4 carriers on a single tower, which has this much bandwidth. So the problem we solved was there's going to be explosion of data. How do we build high speed, but cost effective and reliable network that took all the data, aggregated it, and then then handed it off at wireless carrier switches. So that piece of the network is called backhaul, and we used a combination of fiber and microwave technologies to build this piece of network. And we spent about 6 to 7 years building it. We built it across 13 markets in the US, across 4,000 to 5,000 sites. So we became the largest independent backhaul provider to all the wireless carriers in the US. So AT&T, Verizon Wireless, T-Mobile, Nextel at that time, you name it. Basically, everybody was a customer of Fiber Tower. And after about 6 years, we were acquired by a large public company. And that was just an amazing experience. We raised $225 million in equity. So in venture capital funding, we basically, that's the amount of money we raised to build the business. And I'll quickly share the part 2 of this as well, and then I'll come back to some of my learnings, and then I'll open it up. We had, I guess, really enjoyed working well with each other. We felt as four co-founders, we got along really well. People were reasonable, they were predictable, they were mature. So we decided to work together again, and we started a second company following the same process. So again, we were a team before an idea. We followed a similar incubation model, and we started another company called Slice Technologies, which was in the space of market insights for e-commerce. So, um, if you're a large CPG brand like Procter and Gamble or Johnson and Johnson, you are interested in understanding what does e-commerce mean for me as a traditional business. We were providing that data and that insights to them. We built that business over about 4 years, and that was acquired by a Japanese company called Rakuten, which actually sponsored FC Barcelona. So to make a soccer connection there, and sponsors Golden State Warriors. I spent 2-3 years with Rakuten post acquisition. I was the head of product and CEO. And after that, I joined Innovation Endeavors, which was the firm that funded us. So now I'm a venture capitalist. We invest in early stage companies. And I also, like Raul is doing here, I actually teach a similar class at Stanford. I teach 2 classes, one called Startup Garage, another one called Formation of New Ventures. So that's sort of a quick summary, just to lay out the context. And I'll quickly maybe talk about what I value through this process. What are some of my own learnings? And the first one is, I feel I was intentional, but I also got very lucky by picking the right founders. These people are like family to me. I trust them completely. So for those of you who are going to go start companies, I think having good founders who are basically like soulmates, right? You can always go hire that engineering person, you can always go hire that marketing person, but it's very difficult to find that soulmate. And founders are soulmates. So I felt I got very lucky by choosing these right four co-founders. And again, we worked together for like 18 years. And that's just been an amazing joy for me. The second thing that I think worked very well for me in both these companies was we ended up picking big spaces with strong tailwinds. So wireless data and e-commerce, they were both growing very rapidly. So when a space is growing rapidly, you can invariably find some kind of a product angle, and people will be willing to pay for that, right? So this is, again, many of you will go out and start different type of companies. What I'm talking about is, again, I'm based here in Silicon Valley, so I'm talking about technology companies. But I think there are many different ways of starting a business, from something that's bootstrapped to something that you can do with 2 people and build that as a venture of yours. I was doing it in a different kind of a construct with venture capital funding. So they have certain expectations around, how big the business can be, how much it will get sold for, and so on. So we were looking for those type of problems, and I was lucky in that we spent the time. And I think this is one of the things I would love for you to kind of take away from this discussion. I think picking the problem right is an important first step. And picking your founders well is a very, very important first step. It's very difficult to change both of those things, right? You're going to spend 5, 6, 10, 15 years building a company. And it's very important that you have the right co-founders that you trust. Otherwise, I think you probably have all seen cases where companies fall apart because of founder issues, right? Second thing is picking a problem that you are excited about, but a problem that also has legs. Let's solve a problem that people care about, right? You could pick a problem and bang your head against the wall for 2, 3, 4 years. Or if you do the upfront work, hopefully you pick a problem where there is a need, where you've done a lot of customer discovery, and before you sort of commit to it, you've heard good feedback from the customers that, hey, if you build it, I'll pay for it. Or this is a pain point that I have, and I'm willing to pay you for it if you are able to build it. So, good founders, a right problem, that's sort of the basic ingredients. Once we got into building the company, I think the third thing that frankly we ended up doing well, intentionally or unintentionally, was focusing on the culture, and building the right kind of mechanism within the company so that people wanted to do the right thing. People wanted to go above and beyond, and the mission of the company mattered. So going back to the feedback thing that I referred to in our operating principles, one of the things that we did and we are very proud of in both our companies is we rolled out this feedback um, thing, and happy to kind of share more about that in Q&A. But it's a very simple technique. If let's say Rahul and I work together on a daily basis, we would sit down and say, hey, Rahul, here are the 3 things that you're doing with me that make you more effective with me, and here are 3 things that you're doing that make you less effective with me. So we can both learn from each other and grow together as professionals. Now, it's a simple idea, but by doing that, we were able to do 2 things. One is small problems didn't become big problems. It gave people a space to talk about things so that they could be addressed early on without, in most companies, once you guys go out, in most big companies, there is not a forum, there is not a venue to talk about this. You may be pissed off at your manager, you may be pissed off at your colleague, but you're never going to talk about it, right? And that results in friction, that results in organizational drag. So I think putting those things out in open helped us move fast. And second, it created a culture of trust. If I'm going to tell Rahul, here are the good things or here are the bad things, that requires courage on my part. And that requires willingness on Rahul's part to hear that, to hear both good and tough feedback. But when you're able to do that with each other, it increases trust. So by focusing on culture, I think we got not 1x, but we got probably 2-3x of the impact from our employees. So just to give you an example, after we were acquired by Rakuten, and Rakuten has acquired many, many companies. After we were acquired, I remember sitting in this meeting with the chief human resources officer, and they showed a chart with attrition rates of the companies that they've acquired, of their different business units. Our business Slice was at an attrition rate of 1.3%. That means of 100 people, only 1.3 left in a single year. The next best was 13%, 1.3, so 10x, to as high as like 30%. So I think when you're able to retain people and people are committed to the cause, I think it just goes far. And I think this focus on culture, once we had the right opportunity, right founding team, really helped us, succeed in what we did. And then I think 2 other things that I'd say are, for those of you who are going to go start companies, stay lean. And what I mean by that is, I think both within your company and in your personal life, don't build a big expense structure. Don't go rent a big house. Don't go buy fancy cars. Same in the company, get reasonable office space. Don't get office space where you're paying, whatever expensive dollars. Don't have these like crazy massages at work and so on. Don't do crazy stuff. Stay lean, because I think it makes a certain statement about what you value. And second, I think it extends your runway and dollar further. So people self-select. People are going to come there not because you're Google and you're offering free lunches and free massages. They're going to come there because they resonate with the mission. They like what you're doing. They like the people and so on. So people pick for the right reason. So stay lean. Again, both in your personal life and in the company you build. And final thing I'll say is stay humble. I think one of the things I've really appreciated over time is that, I mean, if you look around you, there's many, many smart people sitting to your left and to your right, right? Um, and it takes, and all these people are going to go do amazing things. And it takes a lot of luck to, succeed in these entrepreneurial ventures. Entrepreneurial ventures, by very definition, are risky and are prone to failure, and so on. So, don't let success get to your head. Stay humble. I think your business partners, your customers, your suppliers, they appreciate that if you treat people well. So those are the 4 or 5 things that I would say. Again, to summarize, I would say pick well, do your homework upfront, um, and if you get a shot at building the company, focus on culture, give the people the right tools, and stay lean and stay humble. So that's maybe just quick context. And Rahul, I'm happy to double click on anything, or we're happy to take questions.
I have a few. Thank you so much for that, Harpy. I have a few questions that students prepared that I feel are. I mean, I have many questions that are insightful. Some of them arrived at the last minute, but so the curation wasn't as effective as I wished for. But the questions are very deep.
Let's go deep.
Let's go deep. Well, actually, let's begin with when you talked us through Fiber Tower and how you came to that idea, but and like you said, you were solving a problem that is a couple of years out. With Slice, that happened as well, and with everything that's been happening in AI and big data and that sort of thing, that validates your decision. What year was this when you founded Slice?
Slice was 2010.
2010.
Fiber Tower was 2001.
Yeah. So can you talk us a little about how did you come across this opportunity? Perhaps you'd been ruminating on it for a while before you actually decided to go on to that. Can you talk us through that process?
Absolutely. So Fiber Tower, the way we came up with that was, so we talked to professors, we talked to venture capitalists, we talked to other founders. We spent like a lot of time, and frankly, we went through a lot of dead ends. So I don't want this to sort of sound like, hey, we started this process and came out with this shiny idea. We went through a lot of dead ends. We took a lot of wrong turns. The way we came up with the idea for Fiber Tower was we would actually ask people this question. We realized, hey, look, we weren't experts. We were never going to become experts in wireless. We were never going to become experts in fiber optics. But they were experts out in the field. And we felt that if we could engage with them, if we could ask them the right questions, then they could point us to the problems that exist. So this was the question we asked that worked beautifully for us. We would go talk to engineers, we would go talk to product managers and ask them, hey, if what you're doing today is successful, what problem does it create 24 months out? Are you following me? So we would go and ask, what do you see is the next bottleneck that you're going to hit if the solution that you're building is successful? So we frankly we were at a conference in Denver. We went to a Nortel booth. Nortel is this big provider of equipment for cell phone provider for wireless carriers. We were talking to an engineer there, and the engineer, we asked him the question that, hey, you got all this like equipment that you're showing off. It was 3G at that time. This is cool. Wireless carriers are going to put this equipment out in the field. What problems is it going to create? And the guy said, hey, I think there's not enough capacity at cell sites. So we weren't like these geniuses that came up with the idea ourselves. We frankly leaned on the experts in the space to tell us where the problems were. And I think we kind of were good at connecting dots. And that's how we came up with that sort of nugget of an idea. And then we came back and did a lot of work to validate if this was a problem. We talked to the heads of engineering at a number of wireless carriers. We did a lot of work on, is there an economical way to build a solution like this? So Rahul, that's how we came with the idea for Fiber Tower. And we followed something very similar for Slice. We were actually working at that time, Apple had started issuing electronic receipts. You would go to an Apple store and they would send you a receipt for what you bought. And we're like, that's cool. We think every retailer is going to start doing that. So we figured that the point of sale system of Apple is effectively replicated in people's inboxes, right? Every time you go shop at Walmart, you go shop at Best Buy, they send you this electronic receipt. We're like, what if we could organize that data? Wouldn't it be valuable to see what are people buying in the last 24 hours? What was the impact of the sale that Amazon ran or whatever? So that led us to, hey, e-commerce is growing. Big brands spend a lot of money on getting insights from players like Nielsen about what's selling, what pack sizes, is red selling better than yellow, and so on. So we're like, we can do that thing for e-commerce. So that's how we came up with both the ideas.
Thank you for that. Next question, and this is about something that you're doing now as a venture capitalist, but I'd like to ask you about this from an entrepreneur's perspective. At Innovation Endeavors, you describe super evolution according to 3 criteria. How did you arrive at those 3 criteria? I mean, because you obviously filtered out a lot of stuff, aggregated stuff, and how do those insights apply to somebody building a company now? Would you recommend people look at super evolution? I assume you would, and perhaps in markets like India or Mexico.
So again, I think I want to step back for a second. There are many, many ways of being a founder, right? I have done one type of entrepreneurship. I think venture capital funds a very, very specific type of entrepreneurship. I think we looked at the numbers, Rahul, not too long ago. I think there's something like a few 100,000 businesses that are started in the US every year, and venture capital is involved with less than 0.5% of them. So, I think I fully want to encourage people in the room to go look at different ways of creating a business and not just look at technology and what Silicon Valley does. So I'll get to your question about super evolution in a second, but I also want to say that, hey, if somebody wants to go start a family business, I think that's awesome. If somebody wants to go buy a business and grow it, by rolling up other businesses and putting them together, or by extending the business, I think that's a very valid way to do it. If somebody wants to create a brand new business around, whatever insights you have, like, nearshoring to Mexico and sort of the trends around that, I think that's totally fine. So entrepreneurship is anywhere from, hey, I'm running a 1% entity to I'm running, entity that could be thousands of people. And I think those are all great choices. Those are all great answers. So I don't want to promote a specific way of entrepreneurship. I think if you want to start a company by bootstrapping, and by that I mean you want to invest your own money and be profitable and then grow the business out of those profits, I think that's an amazing way to do it. If you want to grow the business by borrowing money from friends and family or taking loans, I think that's a very good alternate way of doing it. The third way of doing it could be that you get grants from the government. Fourth way of doing it could be you get money from venture capitalists or angels and so on. So many ways of doing it. So I think very important for you to figure out what feels right to you. And it could be, I want to start a business with my good friend or with my brother, and that's awesome. Or it could be, hey, I want to be the next Elon Musk, and I want to be shooting rockets, and that's totally fine too. So I think to Rahul's original question, I think the type of businesses we are involved with are essentially technical businesses going after large spaces. And the way venture capital works is that um, venture capitalists make money, our investors make money when these companies grow up to be very big, and they can be sold for large amounts or they can go public. So that means they are, by definition, um, a very specific type of a business that has that type of a run rate or that type of a growth path. So we are investing, I think, to your point about super evolution, Raul, we are looking for companies that are founded by technical founders and that benefit from some combination of data, compute, automation to change industries. So, for example, um, um, I'll give you maybe a couple of examples. Um, One of the companies that I'm on the board of is a company called Gatik.ai. It's an autonomous trucking company. So they provide driverless deliveries between a warehouse to stores or store to store. So, for example, they work with Walmart and they drive trucks autonomously from their distribution center to their stores. And that's done, many, many times a day. And there's a real driver shortage in the US. So that's an example of a company that is doing trucking, but it's a very, very technical company, right? They are using cameras, LiDARs to sort of look at what's in front of them, make decisions. Is it safe to turn right? Is it a red light? Should I turn? Should I not turn? So, but we feel that that's a company that can have just a disproportionate impact on the progress of mankind, right? Transportation is an $800 billion market in the US alone, and there's a shortage of 80,000 drivers in the US. So when you can do something like that, you really solve a very, very big problem for a company like Walmart. So that's an example of a company. Another one that I was that I might use is we have this company called, I'll just turn my screen for a second. So if you see this map here, that's a map of Tel Aviv beach. So this is from one of our portfolio companies. It's called Planet or Planet Labs. So they launch hundreds of these satellites that are basically this big, like the size of a bread box. And these satellites go around the Earth and basically take photos of the Earth every 24 hours. So they're able to create a new map every 24 hours. It's, again, a compute problem. They take all this data, they stitch it together using software. And now if there is a flood, if there's a fire, or if you're seeing that, hey, did Russia move troops and tanks into Ukraine, you can use satellite imagery to know the before and after. So these are, again, very, very high impact companies which are very technical. So that's a long answer, Raul, around what does super evolution mean and what type of companies and that encompasses.
Okay, so those are very technical endeavors, but also thank you for mentioning all of the gamut of the everything from family business, lifestyle businesses. How do you think about considering exit strategies when you're deciding on an opportunity? And this is from me more than from students.
Yeah, again, it depends on what type of business you're trying to create.
And let me elaborate on that, just because exit strategies are basically when you can cash out of your business. Son las estrategias que puedes seguir para recuperar el valor de lo que construiste durante 3 o 4 años, ¿no? Entonces, ¿cómo te sales del negocio cosechando el valor que generaste, ¿no? Go.
Oh, are you handing it back to me?
Yeah.
So again, exit strategies and how do I cash out of this business is very dependent on the type of business you create. So for example, if you are starting a business that's going to serve your neighborhood. Maybe that's just a cash flow business, right? And maybe you can sell it to the next owner. And I would think about that very differently. But if you are, starting, let's say, a venture capital funded business or a private equity funded business, I think two things. You would want to know that there are suitors, there are buyers for the type of business you're going to create. So that usually means, are there adjacencies? So for example, let's see, um, like Uber. Let's use an example that maybe everybody's familiar with. Many ride-sharing companies in Latin America, in Middle East, in Southeast Asia, they basically copied the Uber model. And one of their exit strategies was that, hey, maybe Uber would come and buy us. And the other was that, hey, maybe we'll be large enough that we can go public. So I think going back to you want to choose well, I think Rahul is asking a good question around, okay, you should also be mindful about, okay, how do I exit this? How do I fund this business? And typically you're looking for adjacencies, players in and around you, and who could acquire you. And I think especially for venture capital funded business, I would not build a business just to be sold. You want to build a business that you think can grow large so that you can control your own destiny and hopefully go public. If you're building a business to be grown, then you're at the mercy of somebody else. But businesses get acquired all the time. So you want to build for going all the way, but if somehow along the way a good offer comes along or you hit a roadblock and you can't grow, then you should know that you can sell the business.
Yeah, and it's often we try to sell our knowledge, and that is difficult to cash out from because we are the business. So, but anyway, let's get personal. Harpy, can you think of some time that you've screwed up royally, and if you're comfortable sharing what happened and how you handled it, and how that relates to your story, your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share some examples there. So I think the first time I remember we screwed up royally was when we were building fiber tower. We were basically selling capacity. So think of it as we are selling you have a connection at your home, we would sell a connection to a wireless carrier, to a cell site. We thought that the price of connectivity was $750 per unit. And we asked many people and we got feedback that that was the right price. But 2-3 months into it, and we shared these models with our investors, and 2-3 months into it, we realized that the price was not $750, it was actually closer to $300. So think about your revenue suddenly being cut by more than half. And that was a big problem, right? Not many income statements can withstand that type of a screw up. And we were actually really close to closing a financing. So we had a term sheet that we had actually signed when we discovered this screw up on our part. What we did was, first of all, we were like really scared. And this was like, wow, we really got one of those big assumptions wrong. But we decided that we were going to go tell the investor that here is the issue that we've run into. And if they pull the term sheet, if they decide not to move forward, then so be it. But we can't close the round knowing what we know. So we went and told them this, and they were kind of spooked, but they did some work for the next couple of days and came back to us and said, hey, we still believe this is a big problem. And they asked us how we would if we can adjust our costs to handle this and so on. So long way of saying, I think we were scared, but we were transparent. The investor said, okay, thank you for sharing it. I trust you guys. And the funding moved forward. So it had a happy ending, but it was something that would have killed the business.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this was about 10 years before lean startup became a thing, but it basically follows the same process. You know, it was a pivot or persevere moment, and but you were very frank with yourselves and with your main stakeholders at the time. So I think that's a super valuable lesson. I have many more questions, but I think that it's going to be better to turn it over to the crowd. So I'd like to have volunteers to share the microphones, one on each side. Thank you, Joshua. Somebody on this side. Gracias, César. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's turn it over for questions. Pueden preguntar en español, yo con mucho gusto traduzco las preguntas al inglés. Y si considera necesario, también puedo traducir las respuestas. Max, then Santi.
Hi.
Can you hear Harpy?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Max, and my question actually is, as a venture capitalist point of view, what's something like, I don't know, I don't want to describe it like a key, but something that these startups needs to have to invest with them, like something that you as a venture capitalist say this is something that all of them needs to have.
It's two things. One is the right team. That's, if I were to pick one thing, that's the most important thing. Because the ideas, I mean, you will get hit from many sides when you're building a company, right? There's competition, there's assumptions you're going to get wrong, like I just said, and so on. So a good team that I think is going to walk through walls is one of the most important things we look for. And second is the market and how big is the opportunity. I think in large markets, in growing markets, I think teams can figure out a way. But if you are addressing a narrow market, a shrinking market, or a market where there is, big incumbents, I mean, if you come to me with a plan that, hey, I only want to sell to big pharma companies and they're dinosaurs, I'm going to probably have a problem with that. So those are the two main things, team and market.
So I'm Santiago. My question is, what's the experience or the feeling that you kind of went to the dark side, meaning that you were an entrepreneur and now you're a venture capitalist? I'm not just judgmental. I also want to be a VC guy. So what's your approach on that?
It's a good question, and you guys are clearly a sophisticated crowd. It's a very different job, honestly. I think being a founder, you're working with a team on a single problem all day for like 5-10 years, right? You're going to do one thing and you are just doing that one thing. In a VC role, I think it's like sort of a mile wide and an inch deep type of an analogy. In a single day, you're looking at many different companies, many different domains, and I don't feel like an expert at all of those things. So you're learning fast. I always feel like the entrepreneurs know a lot more than I do. Versus as a founder, I feel like I knew more than anybody in the world about that particular problem. And other thing in venture capital is you don't have a team particularly, right? I mean, as a startup founder, you're working with a team of, 20, 100, 300,000 people. as a venture capital, we are very small organizations, right? You don't have a team of like 10 analysts supporting you. So it's more individual contributor and solo versus team player as a founder. So it's a very different job. And I think venture capital is not for everybody and startups are not for everybody. So I think it just depends on how do you like to work, what type of feedback do you need from the team, what type of support do you need from the team. So I'm happy to chat about that more. But I think being a founder doesn't mean that, it's the same job that you go do as a VC.
I'd like to follow up on that question. Do you think that the best VCs have entrepreneurial experience, or is it a mix, or could you reflect on that for a little?
It's a mix. I always liked my VCs to have entrepreneurial experience. Otherwise, they're giving you sort of this, academic advice. But I have seen so many founders, so many VCs that are very successful that don't have that. And, they have good judgment. They are able to advise people well. They build good relationships with founders. They are a quick study, so they learn fast. So Mike Moritz was a writer, right? He was a journalist. And he's one of the most successful VCs.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your time. It's very appreciated. My question goes along the lines, you said earlier that when you're looking for associates, well, your associates are basically, in a way, your soulmates.
Your partners.
Yeah. Your partners, your associates are basically your soulmate. What does that process look like? How do you identify those people, and how do you distinguish that from friendship? And I'm just curious about that. How could you expand upon that?
That's a great question. Good friends don't always make good co-founders. I think when I use the term soulmate, I distinguish it from being, a good VP engineering or a good VP sales. Because in the startup journey, you're going to hit many ups and downs, many ups and downs. And what I appreciated with my co-founders was we had this mutual trust and respect. And most importantly, I felt they were reasonable people around the table, and I knew that they would act predictably, right? I wasn't worried that, somehow if we hit a rough patch, somebody's going to just say, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. We were all in the fight together, and I knew that we were going to be in the fight together till the very end. So that's why it's not about a certain scale. It's not about, again, I'm looking for a VP engineering who's my co-founder. It's about people that I can trust that are going to be with me on this journey. You want complementary skills. I think that's very important, right? You don't want 3 VP engineerings to start a company together because they are basically clones of each other. So you want complementary skills, but I think there are co-founder skills, which are what I describe as predictability. You're going to support each other, you're going to challenge each other, you're going to question each other, and so on. But then there's sort of these functional skills. So the way we got comfortable with it was we had a lot of discussions as we were testing ideas before we committed to each other, and we built a good sense of intuition around culture, values, norms, how we would work together. And I think that's what you're looking for in a co-founder.
Okay, hi. First of all, my question is more, I think, philosophical. If you go 5 years to the past, what experience where you make maybe a mistake or something that you didn't like? It worked. What do you do for resolve that problem, and maybe that could work?
Can you repeat the question in Spanish?
Si se va 5 años atrás, algún error que haya cometido, una experiencia que no salió de tal forma como él quiso, ¿cómo lo resolvería para que fuera exitoso?
So 5 years back, have you made any, or recent, in the relatively recent past, have you made a mistake, and how did you, significant mistake, and how did you handle that? And, ¿es personal o de negocios? Personal or business, whichever you'd like to discuss on.
I think maybe the one I would think about, and I think this actually runs through a few of them. Like, for example, 2 weeks ago, I was very interested in this company. It's called Syrup. It's in the AI in supply chain space. Good founders, and I've been interested in the space, and I wanted to invest in them, but somebody moved so much faster than I did. On Thursday, they said that, hey, we're going to engage with you. We'll send you the material tomorrow. And on Monday, they already had like 3 offers. And I'm using that as an example in that has happened to me 2 or 3 times, where I wanted to invest in something and you don't have all the information. So you have to make a decision with incomplete information in venture capital. And I found that I wasn't aggressive enough. I didn't move fast enough in this example with Syrup that I'm talking about. And I have found myself making that mistake a few times. So I've corrected for it, but I've clearly not corrected enough for it, because I just lost a deal like as recently as 10 days ago.
Thank you.
Bueno, para los que estamos en camino o que tenemos la meta de poder ser un VC exitoso, ¿no? ¿Cuál es tu recomendación, si es algo mejor solo quedarse como Adventure Capital o terminar consolidando algún grupo empresarial? Y si tienes algún libro o artículo que nos podrías recomendar para que nuestra meta pudiera ir más orientada y con más información.
Okay, thinking of people who are considering becoming venture capital investors, first of all, would you recommend that they think of different kinds of investing, for example, VC or corporate investing, or perhaps angel investing? And are there specific resources, books that you, or articles that you would recommend, or websites that you would recommend looking at? Also, to add to that, what do you think is a reasonable time span to start doing that, and perhaps different paths to develop into an investor?
I mean, first of all, I would say the world needs more builders than investors. So go start a company which can impact people's lives. I know venture capital is very glamorous and this and that, but I think the world needs more founders.
I agree.
So that's one. But I think a great way to become an investor is, again, you guys are still in your undergrad. Go work in a product organization, or go work in some kind of a engineering role or something like that, where you actually have first-hand experience around how are products built, how are they shipped. Once they are shipped, how do you provide customer support? How do you price these products? I think it's very important to have some real-world context there. And then I think the best way to get a feel for venture capital is do some angel investing on the side. So if you're working as an engineer or a product person or whatever, write a small check in a few companies, and it will help you build your track record. So now you can say, hey, look, I was an investor in these 6 companies, and here's why you should take my money. But it'll also give you a feel for what the job is like. What does it mean to be an advisor to a CEO? What does it mean when they come to you that they're missing their plan? Are you going to be mad at them, or are you going to be trying to help them? Are you going to be holding them? Are you going to say that you're at fault? So I think for where you guys are in your sort of undergrad, I would highly, highly recommend go do something, write a few small checks. You will learn a lot that way. And that I've seen many people do that, then transition that into, a VC firm or angel investing. So that's one track. I think the other track is you can go join like a private equity firm. So many people would go join like a Goldman Sachs or a company like that, do investment banking type of things. And that can lead to a private equity role, which is very financial modeling oriented, because you're buying more mature businesses. You're looking at how they might grow. You're doing like discounted cash flows and so on. So you can join private equity, or you can join late stage venture firms. So, companies that are investing in what are called like Series C, D rounds. And there you're basically flexing more of a financial muscle versus a technical and product muscle. So I think different ways to do it. Again, there's not that many jobs in venture capital. Like I said, it's not like big teams, it's small teams. So it's difficult to break into. But I think if you do some investing on the side, you can build a track record, you can build the experience where you will be valuable to the VC firms. I mean, if you go and say, hey, I'm the Gen AI expert, and I understand Mexico or whatever, somebody would be interested in talking to you guys. I mean, you got to build some kind of a differentiated story, differentiated niche that will be appealing to a investor to hire you. Otherwise, if you look like everybody else, then they can't tell you apart.
Good evening. First of all, I'm happy to see you here. But I wanted to ask, you told us about how you used to gather with your team and speak about your plans for the future and try to find this problem that you wanted to fix. But I mean, I'm sure it took quite some time to achieve it. How did you deal with frustration? What kept you and your team's motor running? And what kind of advice could you give us? We are very young people, right? And we want everything to be immediate. So we would love to be already rich, powerful member. Of course, we have a lot to learn. So what's a good way to deal with the frustration of hitting a wall or not really knowing what idea is the best one for you?
Yeah, it's a very important sort of a tactical question. It's easy to say, hey, go do this kind of a search for 6 months, but you're going to hit a lot of dead ends, like I said. I think 2 things. One, having a co-founding group was very helpful, because that was sort of the inbuilt support system, right? If I'm down on an idea, maybe somebody has a different perspective on it. So I think I would have personally found it very difficult to do it alone. The second thing was we set this out to be a 6-month process. And I knew that, hey, look, I can take 6 months to do anything. And if it didn't work, I could go get a regular job. That was not a problem, right? I felt that I could go get the same job 6 months later that I would get today. So I'm like, okay, this is a privilege. When else am I going to have this opportunity where I can partner with, 2, 3 other people and go try to start my own company? So I was able to frankly frame the risk in a very, very contained manner. That it's not that I'm jumping off a cliff here. It was that I'm giving myself 6 months, and if it works out, it'll be amazing. And if it doesn't work out, it's fine. I'm going to go get a job. And 5 or 10 years later, it wouldn't matter if I worked for those 6 months or not. So I think so a lot of this is, I think people are just deathly afraid of starting a company because they are afraid of the risk. But I think it's a very bounded risk, in my opinion. And especially if you raise money, then, hey, you're still getting paid and you get to have equity upside. So I would highly encourage, for those of you who are so inclined to take a stab at it. I think it's a very fulfilling journey, and it's frankly risky, but it's a contained risk.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Mr. Saint. First of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. My question is about for us as freshmen, that having in mind that we are young people and freshmen, well, our experience in life and business is pretty short. How can we be reliable for financial investors to trust on our projects and startups and put their resources on us?
I don't know. I mean, we fund a lot of fresh graduates out of, for example, Stanford, right? These are people who are just coming out of mostly grad school. And I think the way you build credibility is, you guys are going to a good school, you're going to have a good team. And I think that's enough. And if you guys end up going and working and, let's say you're working at, I'm just using an example, you're working at General Motors or working at Facebook. I think each of these things is sort of additional stamp of approval, and you're going to build credibility that way. So I never worry about, these kids graduating from Stanford, are they reliable or not? I think the fact that they went to a school like that, I think says a lot, and you guys are going to amazing schools. Did I answer your question, or did you have something else in mind?
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. More venturesome than I would answer. I'd probably say show up on time for meetings, make sure that you reply to emails on time, that sort of thing as well.
I agree with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. That builds trust.
Excellent. Yeah, we have another question. See, Max.
Hi, me again. It's I have a question. Do you mention earlier that it's like you can do business, like the family business or your own like small business in your town or something like that? Do you think that like the venture capital and startups are overrated in the entrepreneurial world? Like all the people that I have known, all they want is like, I want to be in a venture capital and like have like $1 billion company and all that stuff. And I think, I don't know, maybe you can say, like, you can do a big business without venture capital. Like, there is something that we can do, or do you think that venture capital is the only way from now on to do a big business, or business that can be, like, good for the world?
No, not at all. I mean, frankly, again, I may be not remembering the data properly, but again, like I said, 0.5% or less than 0.5% of the businesses that are started in US actually have venture capital involved. I'll give you a good example. Like one of Raul and my friend or our classmates started this business called Tiny Prints, which was basically a greeting card company. And you would go and buy a greeting card from Hallmark. And these guys capitalized on changes in digital printing so that you could print the cards that you want at a low cost. And they could all be different. They could all be personalized, right? They didn't take a single dollar of venture capital for a very, very long time. So they completely bootstrapped the company. I think they invested like $2,000-3,000 of their own money and grew it profitably. And they wanted to be profitable from day one. And they took some venture capital like maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, but not for growing the company, but because they wanted to cash out a little bit. They wanted to take some chips off the table. And then they were acquired by Shutterfly for, I think, $350 million or something like that. So I think bootstrapping is a wonderful way to start a company. There are many, many large enterprises in the US that never took venture capital. So I think if it suits you, I mean, venture capital can help you accelerate things because, you can certainly have extra money to hire people, to buy equipment and this and that. But I think if you can bootstrap or if you can use grants and so on, it's a lovely way to do it. So I'm not saying that venture capital is good or bad. I think it depends on what you want to do as a founder.
It's funny that you mentioned Ed and so this is a company that was started by two classmates of ours who actually got married, Ed and Polly, right? Polly Liu?
Ed and Laura Ching.
Oh, Laura, yeah. So and this resonates with, actually we had a founder this morning who in People and Teams class, who also with their life partner. So, and this triggered a question for me, and perhaps you've lived, I mean, not yourself, but you talked about this idea of your partners being soulmates. In some cases, this is actually, more than just partnerships. These are partnerships for life, literally. But have you seen, we all see partnerships that fall apart in a horrible way. I've witnessed those personally.
Yes.
But have you seen partners who fall out and manage that breakup in a way that we can learn, what really works?
So founders that kind of fell apart?
And managed the process of falling apart, like in an amicable separation. Amicable.
I think most of the times it's not amicable. So I'm having a hard time coming up with good examples. I think the ones where I've seen amicable splits are rare. And it's usually when a founder feels like, you know what, this is not what I want to do. Maybe the company has gone in a different direction, or I don't want to be doing this thing day to day. I would rather go attack a different problem. In those cases, I've seen it can be amicable, and the founders have typically either kept the stock or sold the stock back to the company. But yeah, it's not very common.
Did this happen? As I understand it, one of the team of 4 left. Was this amicable or non-amicable?
Oh, it was completely amicable. So Dave leads the D in Shed. Second time around. So Fiber Tower we did together. Second time around we started the search together. But Dave had actually moved to Seattle. And the 3 of us were here. So he moved to Seattle in between. And when we were searching, he would fly to the Bay Area, and then we would go up there. We would alternate. And we found that, hey, we need to be in the same place if we're going to incubate. So Dave, actually, we all came up with this idea, and we ended up, just to finish that. So we all came up with this idea together, and it was, I think, an idea that didn't need 4 people. So Dave decided to run with it, and we actually all are investors personally in Dave's company. So it was like super amicable. We're like, actually we invested, and Innovation Endeavors also invested in him.
That sounds very amicable. Last question, sorry, Sebastian.
Okay. Hi again. Okay. Clearly, you've had an incredible transition from your educational career to your professional career that seemed to be very planned out. For us that, although it seems far away, it's sooner than we expect, what are your recommendations for, replicating that, or what would you have done differently to improve that? I can rephrase if you'd like.
No, I got it. I got it. I think here's the irony of things. I think the irony is this. Most people in your class are gonna go do things that are expected of them, right? Maybe you're expected to go join McKinsey. Maybe you're expected to go work at the bank or whatever, because everybody does that. And you are all successful. You've done sort of the right things throughout your career so far, and you will likely keep on doing that. And you want to check that box and the next box and the next box. I think if you can have the courage to say that, hey, I want to do this other thing. I don't know if it's popular. I don't know if it's going to work. I think it's that leads to sort of an outstanding or a different type of an outcome. So I just encourage you to not follow the traditional path and do what you really want to do, and not just go join consulting or banking or retail or whatever, because those are the companies that came to campus, or those are the companies that your family expects you to join. If you can go out and do what you really want to do, like, I had loans as a MBA student, and yet I still decided to do this 6-month thing, and I was unpaid. And I think to the earlier question that was asked, one of the hardest things and frustrations for me was that, I was wishing that I could get paid even $1,000 a month. But if you can deal with that ambiguity, I think it takes that type of kind of courage and risk to go do something meaningful.
I think that's a wonderful way of closing the session. Harpy, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us. We hope that next time you'll be in the campus, which I'm sure you'll like, and enjoy meeting this bunch of people. I would like for heartfelt applause for Harpinder and Singh.
Rahul, this was, first of all, I think your facility looks amazing.
Pardon, can you repeat?
I said your facility looks amazing. So I think you guys have created a very special place. And then secondly, I really enjoyed this conversation. I didn't know what to expect, but I think the level of thought and the level of Q&A here, I think it's very sophisticated. So I'm super actually happy to have sort of spent time with the group here.
Thank you so much. I'll take your swag kit to Silicon Valley next time I'm up there, which I hope will be soon.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Good night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
¿Ya no está en vivo? ¿Ya no está la transmisión?